Afghanistan is a dry country where life depends on seasonal snowmelt. For centuries, communities have mastered the desert through the Qaris, an ancient gravity-fed network of underground tunnels that bring water from deep aquifers to the surface. This tradition is governed by the Mirab, a community-chosen water master who ensures the fair sharing of every drop. While these thousand-year-old systems remain the heartbeat of Afghan agriculture, growing demand and changing climates are pushing them to their limits. Today, farmers are forced to look beyond the reach of traditional canals to expand their harvest. Diesel-powered pumps are often rented on an hourly basis to irrigate these lands, but the cost is staggering. Fuel is difficult to transport to remote areas, and its rising price consumes most of a farmer's profit.
ما همه پیسایی که دادیم همه 600 سب دیگه نیم جریب کمتر همین آبداری میکنیم سب آب میخورن ما هنوز پیسه نداشتیم که نباشه ما زیادتر میدادیم که یک جریب آب میخورد همین لایق پیسه همه قبول دیگه.
Beyond the cost, these hydrocarbon-burning engines scar the environment, releasing carbon and pollutants into the air and soil that farmers depend on. Agriculture is at a breaking point, needing a solution that is both reliable and greener. WERP introduces a new model to implement solar-powered irrigation systems across Afghanistan, which focuses not only on system installation, but on the long-term operation and sustainability of the water system as a whole. The project is funded by the World Bank Afghanistan Resilience Trust Fund and implemented by UNOPS. At the heart of WERP is a focus on long-term sustainability, changing how solar irrigation systems are delivered and sustained through a tripartite business model that brings together international aid, communities, and the private sector for the long term. These irrigation systems will be installed, operated, and maintained by private sector energy service companies in return for a tariff paid by farmers. Crucially, after 1 year of satisfactory operation and maintenance, the private companies will also retain ownership of the equipment. This approach is known as the Energy as a Service or EaaS model. Here's how it works. WERP supports 80% of the initial capital costs, and the private company co-invests to install and operate the solar irrigation system. The farmers will pay only an agreed-upon tariff for the energy they use in the form of a share of their new, larger harvest. This unique aspect is reflected in the legal agreement between private companies and farmers, which also ensures that the equipment owned by the private company remains in the area for several years. The model gives the private sector a long-term business to run, and it guarantees the community a partner for maintenance, year after year. To introduce the new EaaS model, WERP developed a holistic process, which includes the identification of sites and communities, engineering designs and costing methodology, the mobilization of private sector partners, and the facilitation between private companies, communities, and authorities to reach agreement on tariffs and other requirements such as land contribution, environmental safeguards, and crop selection. A key part of this process was making the economics work. Under this EaaS model, WERP covers 80% of the initial capital cost, while the private company co-invests 20%. This attracts the participation of private partners while reducing the gap between what communities can afford to pay for energy and the true cost of these sustainable water systems. An economic viability assessment of each site including system design and costing, expected impacts on farmers' yield, and communities' willingness to pay the tariff was an essential first step. WERP assessed more than 370 sites across the country to identify locations suitable for this private sector investment. To support a fair usable cost of the model, WERP also designed a tariff calculation tool that helps private companies account for capital cost recovery, operation and maintenance costs, plant system replacements, and a reasonable commercial margin, the latter being a percentage selected by the company that wraps up return on investment in risk premium. Using this methodology, WERP presents technically, economically, and socially viable sites to private companies through a competitive process. Selected companies are then matched with communities to begin tariff negotiations. Only once private companies and farmers agree on a long-term tariff, the agreement is signed and installation able to begin. These tariff agreements are presented by WERP to local authorities, and they are endorsed by district courts as a risk mitigation measure for both parties. To support farmers in covering the tariffs, WERP works directly with farmers to improve agricultural efficiency and maximize productive use of energy. Through its farmer support component, WERP supports providing high-value seeds, tools, and training, helping farmers increase their yields.
آوی خردانمون همی ساکن دریا مون همی آوی خردانمون کلاشویمون درختمون همی هست.
Finally, excess energy generated during non-peak periods can be used to support small rural businesses such as cooling rooms, drying facilities, and drinking water. This creates additional income for the community, helping farmers to more easily pay their tariffs, while also expanding the revenue base for the private company. While utilizing this energy requires balancing the high cost of battery storage and the project's economics, increasing this local energy demand is key to making the entire model financially viable for the long term. This is the Razak Bardi site in Badakhshan province, one example of how the WERP model works in practice. What was once dry, unusable land will become 49.5 hectares of irrigated farmland, supporting 175 households in their livelihoods. The introduction of higher value crops will increase farmers' yields and incomes, whilst also allowing the private sector partner, Merit Empire PVT, to recover its investments over time. This is the tripartite partnership in action: aid funding, the private sector, and the community working as one. The community is at the heart of the WERP model. At Razak Bardi, a community representative group including 12 women and 20 men was formed to agree on tariffs and manage community resources. They were so comfortable with the model that they contributed land for the infrastructure. This experience has demonstrated that the model can work at scale, but it hasn't been without its hurdles. Our early phases revealed a high-risk environment and technical gaps that initially deterred private partners. After a long iterative process, WERP adapted by carrying on the site feasibility studies and developing specialized irrigation design and tariff tools to plot the business model for its private partners. This shift transformed the landscape. By providing this technical backstopping, WERP's third call for proposals was oversubscribed. Reflecting a newfound confidence, from the private sector to invest in Afghanistan's long-term water and energy infrastructure. To date, WERP has identified more than 47 economically feasible sites where communities agree to tariffs, received over 31 formal proposals from private companies, and signed 14 different agreements for EaaS implementation covering over 1,400 hectares of rain-fed land. However, WERP's model still has room for improvement. Improving farm efficiency after irrigation and building stronger linkages with market off-takers is required to ensure this model can eventually stand on its own. Looking to the future, WERP envisions becoming a platform where the private sector takes the lead to expand energy service delivery in rural areas of Afghanistan, with more responsibility in the process. In this future approach, private companies will also cover technical studies and designs, procurement of equipment, post-construction activities, and manage additional energy uses, such as cold storage and village electrification. This shift will give companies greater control over their investments and will expand their portfolio, strengthening their long-term commercial viability. While the private sector drives this broader implementation, WERP will focus on overall project management, supervision, and quality assurance, ensuring every site meets the highest standards.